My name is Moureeze. I'm from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's in the Caribbean. I am the youth representative for the Caribbean Association for Feminist Research and Action here. And I am also actively involved in youth work and other initiatives here. So basically last year, on the 25th of November, as you may or may not be aware, we would have celebrated Orange Day, and the theme last year was Generation Equality Stands Against Rape. So that for me was my incentive to start doing sessions like these, because I thought, with the way that we interact with each other now in terms of sexting and I wouldn't say new, but more prominent trends such as stealthing emerging, I thought it would be a good idea to address these things, at least from a legal perspective and also social perspective, to give people more insight into what these things are and how we can work towards eliminating the negative practices. So I'm just going to go into a short clip that basically explains what stealthing is. And yeah.
There is an alarming new sex trend on the rise called stealthing.
Stealthing is making news around the world. It's when a man doesn't wear, takes off, or damages a condom during sex without consent.
People have been stealthing since the condom was created.
Can you explain why you do it?
It feels better when there's no condom on.
Immediately it goes through your head, STI pregnancy.
Whilst hailed as a sex trend, it's actually a serious sexual offence.
If you've not consented to that, then it could be a rape.
In online forums, men discuss why they do it and how they get away with it.
I developed my own little tricks, making sure I shot my load deep inside the girl's unsuspecting
Have you guys ever heard of stealthing?
Right, so as you can see, stealthing brings with it its own range of problems and issues. But if we look at it in the context of criminal law, so for us, we have the criminal code, and section 123 is where rape is defined. And with regard to consent, the essential parts are that the individual was aware that the person did not consent to intercourse, or they were reckless as to whether the person consented. Now, we do not make accommodations for same-sex relations currently. So where you see he and she, we do mean he and she, because that's where we are right now. So in terms of rape and stealthing, what I wanted to look at was the section that pertains to subsection 5 and false representations as to the nature of the act, because I believe that that section would be instrumental in encompassing stealthing under our current legal framework, even if we don't have specific criminal provisions relating to stealthing. You could see that it states that for the purpose of this section, a woman is deemed not to have consented to sexual intercourse if her consent is obtained by threat or force, or by use of force, or by means of threats or intimidation of any kind, or by fear of bodily harm, or by means of false representations as to the nature of the act. And when you look at false representations as to the nature of the act, I mean, when we think about stealthing, we're thinking about, okay, so you and I have agreed to have sex, so you've obtained consent, but it was conditional. It was conditional on the use of protection, usually obviously for stealthing, the agreed mode of protection is the condom. And in the removal of the condom, the consent is effectively nullified because that's not what I signed up for. That's not what you signed up for, you know. I signed up for sex with a condom, and you remove the condom and expose me to risk and all of these other things in the act of removing the condom. So is there anything anybody wanted to mention at this point? Any questions? Any concerns? You can just type them in the chat. I'll just wait a moment. Guess not, we're doing okay. All right, so I'm gonna move on to non-consensual pornography and the Cybercrime Act. We have, in St. Vincent, we have new legislation in the form of the Cybercrime Act. Oh, sorry, I see somebody's asking a question. Let's see. Oh, okay, thank you, Frank. Right, so we have new legislation in the form of the Cybercrime Act, and I've just grabbed some photos of some personalities that we would be familiar with that would have experienced what we call non-consensual pornography, which is basically where someone shares your private images without your consent. So it's not that you signed up to be the next star on Pornhub, it's that you guys were in an intimate situation, you recorded it in some type of way, and the other person makes a unilateral decision to share these images, usually on the internet, or you know, where you get those WhatsApp messages and they're like, oh, look at this girl and she was having sex with this guy, or this guy, and look at him. So I mean, we do have some people Hi, Becky. Okay, so in terms of the criminal code and same-sex relationships, yes, they are working on advocating for the inclusion of persons who are involved in same-sex relationships, bringing them under the umbrella of protection that's offered by the law, but that's actually, it's a work in progress because the matter's in court and they're discussing it because we haven't really made any accommodations at all for those people. It's actually illegal to engage in intercourse with a person of the same sex. So yeah. So as I was saying, you know, not everybody is gonna turn out to be Kim Kardashian and be able to leverage the non-consensual sharing of your intimate images, you know. So let's look at what we have under our Cybercrime Act. Now, the reason I chose to focus on the act is because we do have fairly frequent incidents where persons would say, okay, well, I didn't take the photos. I was not the photographer. I didn't record the incident. That's nothing to do with me. But when you look at the way that it's encapsulated under the act, the violation of privacy, they have covered the capturing of images, the storing of images, the publication and transmission of images of people's private areas. And the essence of this is that it's done without the person's consent. And also with the element wherein they would have had a reasonable expectation that they could disrobe in privacy or that their private area would not be visible to the public. regardless of whether they're in a private or public place. And this to me is particularly relevant in light of one of our most popular releases, so to speak, where the individuals were engaging in a public place. They were engaging in intercourse in a public place, but one could say that they did have the expectation of privacy because they went at a time where it wouldn't be expected that other people would be there, and so you could still say that they did have the expectation of privacy. The act goes on to state that where a person commits an offense of that nature, they could be liable to a fine of $100,000 or imprisonment for 2 years or to both, or conviction on indictment to a fine of $250,000 or to imprisonment for 5 years or to both. Now, when they say capture, they mean videotype, photograph, film, or record by any means, and private area covers the genitals, pubic area, buttocks, and breasts. So they've tried their best to encapsulate all the different ways where people would utilize the devices that we have access to now to violate other people's privacy. And that is all that I wanted to capture under the law. So I really would like now to open up the floor for questions, for discussions, for sharing other experiences, because that's usually my focus. I prefer to have an interactive type of discussion.
Okay, hey guys, thank you very much, Moureeze. That was actually very insightful. So I'm just going to, if you have questions, I can actually unmute you, so you can actually have like, as opposed to like having a text thing. I don't want to unmute everybody at the same time, so we don't talk over each other. So if you have any questions, please let me know. So I think the most important question from what I picked up, Moureeze, for me, was the bit where you talked about like the same-sex relationships in SVG. I'm just finding out that they are actually illegal in the SVG. Is that so? I mean, this is coming from me, who isn't Bay, or I don't live there, and I haven't been there either. Is there like a punishment for it, and is there any giant, like, is the law getting to that point where they have made like certain movements or certain is it oh god, I'm trying to find the right words, but it's something along the line of, are there any plans made at the moment? Is it something we can say, oh, in the next 2 years, 3 years, or is it just like it's one of those things on the like on the bottom cases or something? I don't know. Did you get me? Hello? Oh my God. Hi, Moureeze.
Yes. Right. So I was saying,
okay,
it's not that we have any plans. It's just that let me find an exact quote to you. So we have some specific provisions within our criminal code that relate to buggery and gross indecency, basically. And so we currently have a challenge before the court. We have 2 individuals that have opted to challenge these particular provisions within our law. So the matter is quite literally just before the court. So depending on what the court says in terms of whether the challenge is deemed valid, and whether legislative amendments would be required as a result we're just waiting for the matter to progress and for judgment to emerge, basically, if that makes it any clearer.
Yeah, it does.
But in terms of the actual enforcement of the provisions, I wouldn't say that there's such strong enforcement of the provisions. So it's not that they're going around deliberately looking for people to prosecute under the provisions.
Okay. Okay.
So
I think that makes sense. And I have a second. Okay, Randall has his hands raised. I have a second question regarding this. So I can see here that people who commit and these offenses have a certain fine that they have to pay. How much has this law actually been
used? Yeah, no.
To have a law.
You see, the thing about these, that's why I work towards raising awareness and making people feel comfortable interacting with the law, because we do have the provisions, but the general perception is, okay, well, you know, that's not for me. I'm just a regular person. I can't bring a matter in court, or I can't go to my attorney, you know, it was my fault. And also, you know, there's a shame surrounding, you know, sexual issues. So people are like, well, you know, it's my fault. I sent the nudes. I shouldn't have done that. Or, well, I just have to live with it now if he or she drops the nudes, so to speak. You know, people don't really look at the law as something that they can use to their advantage. So we actually haven't had a lot of matters where people have decided, hey, you know what, you have committed an offense under this act, and I'm gonna do what's necessary to bring it to justice.
All right. Randall, I saw your hands up. I like to think you have a question.
Maybe you have to unmute him?
Yeah, I just realized I didn't unmute.
Okay.
Okay, yes. It's not really a question. I accidentally left. But before I left, I saw a question from Becky, and I'm not sure if Moureeze spoke about it, because when she was speaking, that's when I left. But I mean, it was regarding the legislation, I think, in St. Vincent. Well, more or less, it's like the same in the Caribbean, because I'm from St. Lucia, which is relatively close. And I must say, although it's the same in each of the Caribbean countries, some countries currently have cases going on where they challenge the legislation. I know St. Vincent has one ongoing now. St. Vincent has one ongoing now. I know Barbados has as well. And St. Lucia, Antigua, and some of the other countries are currently working towards that. So what I would say is, although there are laws that discriminate against such